Hey there, everyone. Welcome to my channel, The Magical Solution. My name is Leilani. We are live here on TikTok, on Facebook, on YouTube, on Instagram, I believe, hopefully. And we are continuing forward with our book, The Gospel According to Spiritism by Allan Kardec. We've already done the first two books, the Spirits book and the Mediums book of this series. So if you've missed those first two books, no problem. Swing over to my YouTube channel. They are there. Don't feel, pressured to stay if you're not comfortable without having gone through the first two books, but also don't feel weirded out to stay because this information is always kind of refreshing and new, and he tends to repeat himself a lot, so it's good for people just popping in. With that said, we are on chapter 5, which is Blessed are the afflicted. Okay, so some of the subcategories in this chapter that he covers are the justice of afflictions, current causes of afflictions, prior causes of afflictions, forgetfulness of the past, reasons for resigning oneself, suicide and insanity, the Spirit's teachings to suffer well or badly, evil and its remedy, happiness is not of this world, the loss of loved ones, premature deaths. If he had been a good man, he would have died. Voluntary suffering, true misfortune, melancholy, voluntary trials, true sackcloth, right? Sackcloth, true sackcloth. Should we put an end to our neighbor's trials? Is it permissible to shorten the life of a patient who is suffering with no hope of a cure? Sacrificing one's own life and making one's own suffering profitable for others. Now, as I mentioned in the previous live, this chapter is going to be a beast. It's not only going to be a beast because he's covering a lot of information, but it's going to be a beast because all of this information is extremely triggering. He covers suicide, he causes reasons for people to suffer. He talks about Alzheimer's, basically. He calls it forgetfulness. He talks about whether or not good or bad people die in good or bad ways. He talks about people who purposefully kill their loved ones to shorten their suffering. He talks about people shortening their life to stop their own suffering. He talks about people who victimize themselves to profit off of their own suffering. He talks about depression, all this stuff. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot, and it's going to get people very worked up. Bendiciones. Hello, hello. It's going to get people very worked up. So my advice to you is this: take everything you hear tonight with a grain of salt. Remember who writes it, remember when it was written. I go through this all the time. Remember the religious influences that were happening around this time. It's all important, so that you don't think everything is doctrine, right? So let's get to it. He first opens up with quotes from the Bible. So Matthew 5:4, 6, and 10. Blessed are they who weep, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are they who suffer persecution because of righteousness, for the kingdom of God is in heaven is theirs. Then he quotes Luke 6:20 and 21. You are blessed, you who are poor, for the kingdom of heaven is yours. You are blessed, you who now hunger, for you shall be filled. You are fortunate, you who now weep, you shall laugh. And then his last quote is from Luke 6:24-25. But woe to you who are rich, for you have your consolation in this world. Woe to you who are filled, for you shall be hungry. Woe to you who now laugh, for you shall be reduced to mourning and tears. And then the chapter begins of the justice of affliction. So this is where he kind of rationalizes what he considers moral and like just and unjust and all that good stuff. So let's get to it. The compensations that Jesus promises to the afflicted of the earth cannot occur except in the future life. Without certainty about the future, these maxims would be nonsense. Even more, they would be a falsehood. But even with this certainty, it is difficult to understand the usefulness of suffering in order to be happy. It is said that in order to have a greater merit, but then one must ask, why do some suffer more than others? Why are some born into poverty and others into opulence without having done anything to justify such a position? Why does nothing ever work out for some while everything seems to smile on others? But what is even harder to grasp is seeing benefits and misfortunes so unequally divided between vice and virtue, seeing virtuous people suffer alongside the wicked ones who prosper. Faith in the future might offer consolation and lead to patience, but it does not explain these anomalies which appear to belie God's justice. However, if one believes in God, one cannot conceive of God apart from infinite perfection. God must be all powerful, holy, just, and wholly good. Otherwise, God would not be God. So, if God is supremely good and just, then God can neither act capriciously nor with partiality. And therefore, the vicissitudes of life have a cause. And since God is just, that cause must also be just. This is what everyone must understand very well. By means of Jesus' teaching, God has placed humans on the path toward that cause. And today, having deemed them sufficiently mature to understand it, God has revealed it entirely through Spiritism, through the voice of the spirits. So again, reminder, guys, this is coming from like a Kardecian Christian perspective. Other practices that stem off of Spiritism and practices of Spiritismo don't necessarily adhere specifically to this. So just keep that in mind. So the current causes of afflictions. The vicissitudes of life are two types. Or if one prefers, they have two very different sources that are important to differentiate. Some have their cause in the present life, others outside of it. On searching for the source of earthly misfortunes, it will be realized that many are the natural consequence of the character and behavior of those who bear them. How many fail due to their own fault? How many are the victims of their own imprudence, pride, and ambition? How many ruin themselves for lack of discipline or perseverance, for wrong conduct, or for not having limited their desires? How many unfortunate marriages there are because they result from calculated self-interest or vanity, and because the heart has played no part? How many disagreements and disastrous quarrels could have been avoided with more moderation and less susceptibility? How many ills and infirmities are the consequence of intemperance and excess of all kinds? How many parents are unhappy with their children because they did not combat their bad inclinations right from the start? Whether from weakness or indifference, they allowed the seeds of pride, selfishness, and foolishness and vanity to develop in them, withering their hearts. And afterward, much later, in reaping what they have sown, they are surprised and afflicted by their children's lack of respect and gratitude. Let all those who are stricken in their hearts by life's vicissitudes and disappointments calmly examine their conscience. Bitch, he literally said, y'all who want to blame the world for your bad actions and reaping what you sow, y'all better have several seats. That's basically what he said. You're welcome on that translation. Let them go back step by step to the source of the misfortunes that afflicted them and see whether they would not often say, if only I had or had not done this or that, I would not be in such a conundrum. Who then can they blame for all of their afflictions but themselves? Humans are thus in the majority of cases, the artisans of their own misfortunes. But instead of acknowledging this fact, they find it simpler and less humiliating to their vanity to accuse fate, providence, bad luck, or their unlucky star, whereas their unlucky star lies in their own carelessness. Misfortunes of this nature assuredly comprise a noteworthy contingent in life's vicissitudes, and humans will avoid them only by working for their moral as well as their intellectual improvement. Human law reaches certain wrongs and punishes them. Condemned persons can thus be said to bear the consequences of what they have done. However, the law does not and cannot reach every wrong. It touches mainly the wrongs that harm society and not the ones that harm those who commit them. God, however, wills the progress of all creatures, which is why God does not fail to punish any departure from the moral path. There is no wrong, no matter how small, or any infraction of the divine law that does not have powerful and unavoidable consequences that may be more regrettable or less so. Hence, it follows that in both small and great matters, humans are always punished for that in which they have sinned. The suffering that is the sin's consequence is a warning they have erred. It gives them experience, enabling them to sense the difference between good and evil and the need to improve themselves so that in the future they may avoid what has been for them a source of bitterness. Otherwise, there would be no motive for mending their ways, and trusting in their impunity, they would delay their advancement and consequently their future happiness. Experience, however, sometimes arrives a bit late, after life has already been wasted and troubled, after strength has already been spent, and after fear no longer has a remedy. Then the person will say, if only at the beginning of my life I had known what I know today, how many wrongs I would have avoided. If I had it to do it all over again, I would do everything differently. But there is no more time left. Like the lazy worker who says, I have wasted my day, he or she likewise says, I have wasted my life. Nonetheless, just as the sun rises the next day for the worker and a new day begins that allows him or her to make up for lost time, so also after the night of that grave, the sun will shine with a new life, making it possible to take advantage of the experiences of the past and make good resolutions for the future. So he's basically saying here, every day is a new day. You're never too old to teach a dog new tricks. It's never too late to change direction, to change your life, to change your habits. It's never too late. And that only lazy people and people who have fallen victim to their quote unquote causes find themselves to simply repeat the day every day until they die. Prior causes of affliction. That's the next part. Now, however, if there are misfortunes in this life, of which humans are the primary cause, there are others which, at least in appearance, are completely foreign to them and which seem to touch them fatalistically. Such is, for example, the loss of loved ones or family breadwinners. Such are, furthermore, the accidents that no foresight could have prevented, the reversals of fortune that frustrate all measures of prudence, natural disasters and congenital infirmities, especially those that take from their unfortunate victims the means of earning their livelihood through labor, such as a physical disability or a mental impairment, etc. So those who are born in such conditions have obviously done nothing in their present life to deserve, without compensation, such a sad fate which they could not avoid, which they are powerless to change by themselves, and which puts them at the mercy of public commiseration. Why then are there such unfortunate beings, while right beside them, under the same roof and in the same family, there are others who have been favored in every way? Oof. So this is where y'all need to hold on to yourself, because he's going to give it to you. Allan Kardec is kind of known for being savage when he speaks to people, but it's not really him. It's the spirit. It's the spirit that's talking. But anyway, let's move forward. Finally, what can be said of those children who die at a very young age and who knew of life only suffering? These are problems that no philosophy has yet been able to resolve, anomalies that no religion has been able to justify, and which would be the negation of God's goodness, justice, and providence, according to the hypothesis that the soul is created at the same time as the body, and that its fate is irrevocably set after a stay of but a few instants upon earth. What caused these souls, having just left the hands of the Creator, to bear such miseries in this world and to merit in the future any sort of recompense or punishment when they could have done neither good nor evil? Nevertheless, in virtue of the axiom that every effect has a cause, these miseries are effects that must have a cause, and if one believes in a just God, then that cause must also be just. Consequently, since the cause always precedes the effect, and since the cause in this case cannot be found in the present life, then it must have been a prior life. That is, it belongs to a previous existence. On the other hand, since God can neither punish us for the good we have done nor for the evil we have not done, then if we are being punished, it is because we have done evil. If we have not done evil in this life, then we did it in another. This is an alternative that is impossible to escape and whose logic shows on what side the justice of God lies. Therefore, humans are not always fully punished in their current existence, but they can never escape the consequences of their wrongs. The prosperity of evil persons is only momentary, and if they do not expiate their evil today, they will tomorrow. And likewise, those who suffer today are expiating their past. The misfortune that at first seems to be undeserved thus has its reason for being, and those who are suffering may always say, "Forgive me, Lord, for I have sinned." Suffering due to prior causes are frequently, like those that arise from current wrongs, the natural consequence of wrongs that were committed previously, that is, through justice that is strictly meted out. Humans bear what they have made others bear. If they were hard and inhumane, they may in turn be treated harshly and inhumanely. If they are proud, they may be born into humiliation and conditions of humility. If they were miserly or selfish, or if they made bad use of their wealth, they may be deprived of necessities. If they were bad children, they may suffer from their own children. Thus, through the plurality of existences and the function of the earth as an expiatory world, one can explain the anomalies displayed in the distribution of fortune and misfortune between good and bad persons on this world. This anomaly exists in appearance only because it is considered from the point of view of the present life. However, if we elevate ourselves by means of thought so to embrace a series of existences, we will see that everyone receives the share they deserve without harm to what will be given to them in the spirit world. And that is because God's justice is never broken. Humans must never lose sight of the fact that they are on a less evolved world and that they are kept there solely because of their imperfections, which each vestitude they must tell themselves that they have belonged to a more advanced world, it would not be happening, and that it depends on them alone by working to improve themselves, not to have returned to this world. So here is where it gets a little like, what's the right word? Like new agey, light workery slash eugenics slash, like this definitely kind of veers into that whole like victim blaming thought process that a lot of psychic mediums have, which is, whatever happened to you, whether you were born a certain way or born under really horrible circumstances, or whether it happened due to later consequences, it all happened for a reason. So you being born that way, apparently, according to this logic, it was because of a past life wrongdoing. But here's where I come in as someone who reads all of these books, because in the very first book, the Spirit's book, he talks about how, or at least the Spirit talks about how, God does not punish, that the evolution of man is destiny. Like, our spirit is destined to evolve and grow, right? How long that takes is completely up to us, right? And that's completely up to our free will and all the choices that we make to either advance ourselves, to keep ourselves stagnant, or regress ourselves. But at the end of the day, when we cross over, according to this, the first book, there's no regression per se. There may be a repeat, there may be some stagnation, but there's no regression, there's no punishment. Here it's saying, well, there's levels, and if you're a real evil doer, there will be repercussions. Now, my thing is this is where we get fucked up as a society who takes these things to an extreme. So you're telling me, the Hitler of 45 is now the disabled person of 2022 because he did such an evil thing. So knowing that all disabled people, or all whatever in that category that we put Hitler in, whatever, so now all of them were evil, bad doers. So, like, what would make the average person who has no freaking sense say, okay, well then let's exterminate all of them because we don't need evildoers? Who's to say that they won't do that? And, like, that's the kind of crazy shit that we constantly have to think about whenever we explore religious practices, whenever we explore dogma, whenever we explore, quote unquote laws of any particular thing. We want to put ourselves in the mind of the most dumbest motherfucker on this planet who has power. What kind of policy, what kind of inventions, what kind of things would they do if they saw this law out of context and they believed it? That's what I call discernment. That's what I call vetting. You know what I'm saying? So again, as we read through all of this stuff, take your time, chew it up, spit it out if you need to. Moving forward. Life's tribulations may be imposed on hardened spirits or those too ignorant to make a choice knowingly, but they are freely chosen and accepted by repentant spirits who want to repair the evil they've committed and to try to do better. So it is that as well. Having performed its task poorly, the spirit asks to start over so as not to lose the benefit of its labor. And therefore, tribulations are at the same time expiations that punish the past and trials for the future, which they prepare. So let us render thanks to God, who, out of divine goodness, grants humans the possibility of reparation and does not irrevocably condemn them for their wrong. So this is yet another rationalization for people who are born under really bad circumstances. It may have been that not so much that it was a punishment or a consequence of their evil doing, but it may have been the choice of the spirit upon death, who now, going through the process of evolution and really kind of reviewing their life, it becomes their choice to say, you know what, I want to come back and, give me a rough life. I need to pay my penance. Like, give me the worst possible, circumstance you can give me. Because again, this is from the perspective that Earth is one of the planes of what we call expiation, one of the planes of making up for your deeds and elevating. That's what earth and this plane is for. It's not a purgatory, it's a school ground, according to this. And so, it's this idea of returning over and over and over again to evolve our spirit. And it's kind of the same concept as the Hindu concept of samsara, right? When you hit a level, when you meditate and do good deeds and you do X, Y, and Z and you blah, 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 you hit a point where you become a bodhisattva or an avatar of that particular thing, which then um, pulls you out of karmic reincarnation and the karmic rebirth cycle. So it's kind of that same concept here as well. Ooh. One must not think, however, that every instance of suffering endured on this world is necessarily the indication of a specific wrong. They are often simply trials chosen by a spirit. Oh, I just read this. I'm sorry. Where did I go? Okay. Expiation always serves as a trial, but a trial is not always an expiation. Trials or expiations, however, are always signs of a relatively low order spirit, because one who is perfect has no more need of being tested, and consequently, a spirit may have acquired a certain degree of elevation, but wanting to advance further, it requests a mission, a task to complete. The more trying the struggle, the more it will be recompensed if it emerges victorious. Such are, more specifically, those persons of naturally good instincts, of elevated spirit, and noble innate sentiments, who seem to have brought nothing evil from their previous existence, and who endure the greatest afflictions with holy Christian resignation, asking God that they might bear them without complaining. On the other hand, one may consider an expiation that those afflictions that provoke complaint and compel humans to rebel against God. Suffering does not provoke complaint. That does not provoke complaint may undoubtedly be an expiation, but this indicates it would voluntarily chosen beforehand rather than imposed. And it is a test of a strong resolution, which is a sign of progress. Spirits cannot aspire to perfect happiness as long as they are impure. Any kind of blemish prevents their entry onto blissful worlds. They are like passengers on a plague ship, to whom entrance to a town is forbidden until they have been purified. It is in their many corporal existences that spirits rid themselves little by little of their imperfection. The trials of life enable advancement when well accepted. As expiations, they erase wrongs and purify. It is the medicine that cleanses the sores and heals the patient. The graver the illness, the stronger the medicine must be. Therefore, those who suffer greatly must tell themselves that they have much to expiate and should rejoice at being healed sooner. It depends on them through resignation to make such suffering profitable and not to waste the fruit by complaining. Without resignation, they will have to start over again. Dang. I, again, have a difficult time chewing on that. But let us move forward, because he keeps going about, like, now, why do we forget our past lives? Like, if we're suffering for it in the here and now, why do they make us forget it? Like, why shouldn't we know what we did wrong to have the life that we live now? Right? So he's going to get into all that stuff in a little bit, but this is where a lot of people get triggered, so I just kind of want to forewarn you. Forgetfulness of the past. It is in vain that one objects that forgetfulness is an obstacle to taking advantage of experiences from previous lives. If God has deemed it appropriate to cast a veil over the past, it is because it must be useful. In fact, such remembrance would entail serious inconveniences. In certain cases, it could humiliate us greatly, or perhaps exalt our pride, or for that very reason, interfere with our free will. In any case, it would cause an unavoidable disturbance in social relationships. A spirit is frequently reborn into the same environment in which it has already lived and find itself in relationships with the same individuals in order to repair the evil it did to them. If it were to recognize in them those whom it used to hate, perhaps its hatred would reawaken. In any case, it would feel humiliated in the presence of those if offended. God has given us for our advancement precisely what is necessary and what will be enough for us. The voice of conscience and our instinctive tendencies taking from us what could harm us. On being born, human beings bring with them whatever they have acquired. They are born as they have made themselves. Each existence is for them a new starting point. It matters little for them to know what they were. If they were punished, it is because they committed evil. Their current evil tendencies are indicative of what still remains within them to be corrected, and that is what they should concentrate their attention on. For whatever has been corrected completely leaves no remaining trace. The good resolutions they have made are the voice of conscience that warns them as to what is good or evil and provides them the strength to resist their evil tendencies. And furthermore, this forgetfulness occurs only during corporal life. Upon re entering the spirit life, the spirit reacquires its memories of the past, and hence forgetfulness is only a momentary interruption similar to what occurs in earthly life during sleep, but which does not prevent our remembering on the next day what we did the day before or on preceding ones. It is not only after death that the spirit recovers the memories of its past. It can be stated that it never loses them, because experience proves that during incarnation, during the sleep of the body, and while it enjoys a certain amount of liberty, the spirit is conscious of its previous acts. It knows why it is suffering and that it is suffering justly. Remembrance is blotted out only during the outward life of relationships. However, due to the absence of a precise memory, which might be painful and harmful in its social relations, it draws new strength in these moments of the soul's emancipation if it knows how to take advantage of them. Now, mind you, I'm going to pause here for just a second. Notice how much he really focuses on this idea of relationships. We talk about this in the first book, we talk about this in the second book, and it reemerges again here in the third book. Relationships are how our spirit evolves. A lot of people spend so much time creating altars and doing rituals, working magic and playing with crystals and giving readings and doing all this stuff in the hopes of cleansing and purifying and elevating their spirit, when in reality, the most spiritual act that we can engage in is the indulgence of life and to be interconnected with one another and to go through all of the emotional waves that a human ability has, and just like all of that is so very pivotal. It's so vital to the spirit's evolution, and this is why so many people have such a hard time with working from home and being remote and things like that. So keep that in mind as we move forward, that relationships are where we're gonna get a lot of our repentance from. So, reasons for resigning oneself, that's the next subcategory. With the words, "Blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be consoled," Jesus indicates simultaneously the compensation that awaits those who suffer and the resignation that leads one to bless suffering as a prelude to healing. These words could also be translated like this: "You should consider yourselves fortunate to suffer, because your pains in this world are the depth of your past wrongs. And these pains, if borne patiently while you are on earth, will save you from centuries of suffering in future life. Hence, you should be happy because God has reduced your debt by permitting you to repay it now, which will guarantee you tranquility in the future. The one who suffers is like a debtor who owes a large sum and to whom his creditor says, "If you pay me today even 100th part of your debt, it will release you from the rest and you will be free. But if you don't, then I will hound you until you pay the very last cent." Would that debtor not be happier bearing all kinds of hardships in order to free himself by paying only 100th of what he owes instead of complaining to his creditor that would he not be thankful? Such is the meaning of the words, "Blessed are the afflicted, for they shall be consoled." They are blessed because they are releasing themselves from their debt, and after they have done so, they will be free. However, if upon being released on the one hand, they go into debt on the other, they never attain their freedom. Consequently, each new wrong increases the debt, for there is not even one, whatever it may be, that does not entail its obligatory and unavoidable punishment. If not today, then tomorrow. If not in this life, then in another. Among these wrongs, one must put in first place the lack of submission to God's will. Therefore, if we complain in our afflictions and do not accept them with resignation and as something deserved, if we accuse God as unjust, we contract a new debt that causes the loss of the benefit that we could have gotten from suffering. That is why it is necessary to start over, exactly as if you were to pay a creditor who has been hounding you, but then ask for the money back as a new loan. Upon re-entering the world of spirits, humans are like laborers who show up on payday. To some, the Lord will say, "Here is your pay for the days you've worked." And to others, the fortunate ones of earth, those who lived in idleness, who placed their happiness in the satisfaction of self-centeredness and in worldly pleasures, he will say, "Nothing is owed to you since you received your pay while on earth. Go and begin your task again." Humans can either soften or increase the bitterness of their trials according to the manner in which they view earthly life. Their suffering is greater if they consider its duration to be long. Consequently, those who look at things from the standpoint of the spirit life understand corporal existence at a glance. They see it as a dot in the infinite. They grasp its brevity, and they tell themselves that this painful moment will soon be over. The certainty of a happier future that is not far off sustains and encourages them, and instead of complaining, they thank heaven for the pains that enable them to evolve. On the other hand, for those who see only corporal life, pain seems unending to them, and it presses on them with all of its weight. The result of the former way of looking at life is that it decreases the importance of the things of this world, leading humans to moderate their desires and to be content with their station in life without envying others, thereby attenuating the mental effect of the setbacks and disappointments they experience. Thus, they derive from it a calmness and resignation as useful to the health of the body as to that of the soul. Whereas with jealousy, envy, and ambition, they willfully give in to the torment and thus increase the misery and anguish of their sordid existence. Woo! So here is a frame of thought that you really see the divide between some of the younger generation and some of the OGs in Spiritismo and in Spiritism. Because the OGs will always tell you that suffering is necessity. It's a necessity for spiritual growth. And the young cats will always say, you don't need to suffer to be a spiritual person. Like, spirituality isn't necessarily learned through painful experiences, right? And so here we talk about why the OGs think the way that they think. It is because, and this is something, again, we can kind of link it back to Eastern philosophy and a lot of like Buddhist philosophy, which is life is suffering. You are always going to suffer. It does not matter, how well-to-do your family is, whether or not you were born with a silver spoon up your butt, whether you have maids and butlers and drivers and don't have to worry about money or food. It doesn't matter. Your life still has a level of suffering in it that maybe you don't see it as that from the outside, but the person living it does. And again, people's threshold for suffering is different. So I don't want you to think that just because this girl got a paper cut and this girl literally almost cut her finger off with a knife, don't think that their pains are different in severity just because visually they are different in severity. Does that make sense? Like the one with the paper cut her threshold for pain might be so low that that paper cut does feel like being stabbed. And this one over here who almost cut her finger off, because of her life experiences, her threshold might be so big that that slash with a knife might feel like a paper cut. And so therefore it's like, oh shit, I gotta wrap this up. You know what I mean? So like it's really important to know that suffering is subjective and it's something that happens no matter what. And so what they're saying here is that you grow from that. That's part of the whole, like that's the vibe. That's life. But if you sit back and you just complain and complain and complain about all the things that go wrong in your life, or if you fall into a depressive spiral where you just want to sit in there, they say to you that you're just going to prolong that suffering and then you're going to have to come back again. Whereas people who take hold of their life, despite the pain, despite the suffering, despite their depression, despite all of it, they grab it and they say, I'm going to just take one step at a time. I'm going to try every day to do something to get myself out of this. And they do that in this perspective by reminding themselves that they are grateful for their suffering, because their suffering means that they're paying for any past wrongs that they had committed in previous lives or even in this lifetime that they may not be fully aware of. And so their suffering is nothing more than them paying their dues and that it will be over soon. So the old cats really do feel like this is very, very important and it's a very big part of our spiritual growth. Some of the younger cats do look at this and say, well, okay, I get this, but at the same time, because I've heard both sides of the argument, right? At the same time, isn't intellectual awareness of one's wrongs just as good as going through a horrible event in order to make amends? You know what I mean? Like, can't you just being informed about your wrongdoings and really kind of meditating on that and contemplating that as a spiritual person, isn't that substantial enough than like putting me through some unrelated traumatic event in the hopes that I will look at it as, oh, this is just me paying for a past life thing? Right? So like I get both arguments. The intellect, the awareness of what you've done definitely helps with regards to making it like, how are you going to pay amends for something you don't know the fuck you did? Like, how are you learning from that? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So there, take it for how you want to take it, right? So now we're on to the next part, which is suicide and insanity. Woo! Suicide and insanity. The calm and resignation acquired in the manner of looking at earthly life and in the faith in the future gives the spirit a serenity that is the best preservative against insanity and suicide. In fact, it is certain that most cases of insanity are due to the troubles produced by the vicissitudes that people do not have the strength to bear. However, if due to the manner in which Spiritism enables them to regard things of this world, they end up accepting with indifference, even joy, the reversals and disappointments that would render them desperate in other circumstances, it is obvious that this strength, which puts them above such events, protects their minds from the distresses that would jolt them otherwise. So he's basically saying here that Spiritism, the rationality of Spiritism and the acceptance of one's, paying of one's dues will sort of protect the mind from falling into despair, psychosis, all the things that people fall into when they make excuses for themselves or when they fall into their disabilities, or their pains or their sufferings. But here's where I get angry. This is a part that triggers me in particular. Okay? Because to me, how I read this is that people who sort of give in, or not give in, who suffer from a chemical imbalance in their brain, and for that depression or ADHD or whatever it is that literally causes them to not be able to make a move, right? It literally immobilizes a person. Now you're saying it's their choice and it's their fault, and it's something that they have to prevent by accepting this philosophy. And by accepting this philosophy, it's almost a cure to this. And I take issue with that. But let's keep reading. Let's see what else he says, right? The same applies to suicide, except for suicide committed in a state of intoxication or insanity, and which we might call unconscious. It is certain that whatever may be the particular motive, it always has discontentment as the cause. Hence, those who are sure that they will be unfortunate only for a day and that better days will follow easily have patience. They only become desperate if they can see no end to their suffering. What is a human lifetime compared to eternity, if not less than one day? For those who do not believe in eternity, however, for those who believe that all is over when life ends, if they are oppressed by trouble and misfortune, they see no end to them except in death. Expecting nothing, they find it very natural and even logical to shorten their miseries by suicide. I don't know. It's triggering for me. I've lost so many people to suicide. I've lost so many people to suicide. And to see these kinds of statements about basically, they're not trying. They're not trying. They gave up. They didn't change their perspective. If they were to just see the perspective of, oh, there's tomorrow and it'll be a better day. If they could just hold on to that perspective instead of thinking that this moment, this suffering is going to be eternal. And that makes me want to burn something down, because there's nothing more untrue about a suicide than believing that they just toss their hands up in and resign themselves to doing this thing. So many of the people that I knew who committed suicide were happy people, lovely people, always joking, people who couldn't wait to hang out with you the next day, who called. There was nothing. Everybody has different thresholds of suffering, and saying that throws me for such a loop. How so, Alex? Tell me how so that throws you for a loop. I'm curious. Hey, Hey, happy holidays to you too. I'm only curious because that's not what he said. That's my sort of, that's like kind of my addition as to the rationale of suffering that he's talking about. So he didn't say it verbatim that everyone has a different threshold. I'm saying that. But I'm curious to hear your take. Like, how does it throw you for a loop? That's interesting. I want to hear that for sure. But let's keep going in the meantime. Disbelief, simple doubts about the future, materialistic ideas, in other words, are the greatest incitements to suicide. They cause moral cowardice. And when men and women of science rest on the authority of their knowledge in order to try to prove to their listening or reading audience that they have nothing to hope for after death, or are they not in fact leading them to the conclusion that if they are unfortunate, then there is nothing better for them to do than to kill themselves? What could they possibly have to say to that would turn them away from this conclusion? What compensation could they offer them? What hope could they give them? None. None at all, except nothingness. And from this, one must conclude that if nothingness is the only heroic remedy, the sole prospect, then it would be more worthwhile to fall into it immediately rather than later on and thereby suffer for less time. The propagation of materialistic ideas is therefore the poison that injects the idea of suicide into a large number of individuals, and those who become apostles of such ideas assume an awful responsibility. With Spiritism, however, wherein doubt is no longer allowed, one's outlook on life changes. Believers know that life goes on indefinitely beyond the grave, and although in other conditions, hence the patience and resignation that quite naturally keep them from any thought of suicide, and hence, in some, a moral courage. So again, this is blaming suicides, calling them moral cowards. So let us breathe. Let us breathe. Because also, I mean, if you look at the prayer book of Allan Kardec, right? The collected prayers of Allan Kardec, the translated version, obviously, for those who don't speak Spanish, but there's a whole prayer for suicides in there. And the pretty much the whole beginning part of that prayer is you who are weak, you who is a coward, you who failed to live on, you who decided to do like it's so like victim blamey and like really fucked up. And then it gets into praying for them. And even praying for them is very condescending the way that it's written. It's like, okay, I pray that in your next life you will have the moral courage to live it through. And like it's like this whole like, I'm sorry you killed yourself. Like it's very just very passive aggressive. It's one of the prayers that I avoid as much as possible when working with cases of suicide. I have my own prayers for suicide. I do not use the collected prayers. But yeah, let me see. Right. Right. Yes. Exactly, Alex. Same. It's so victim blamey. Oh my God. How are you guys? Hi, Rob. Love and blessings to you too. So let's keep going because this is juicy. Oh, wait a second. What time is it? Oh God, I told you guys that I was only going to be reading for an hour. Okay, so let me see how many pages I have left. So I'm on number 17 right now. Ooh, I got a minute. I got a long time. So we're going to cut it short here. Actually, you know what? Let me just finish out this paragraph because then the new section starts. which is basically what the spirit's perspective is, okay, which is great. That's perfect. So this whole section that we just read was Allan Kardec talking his stuff from his stuff. Then the next section is going to be what the spirit's take on it all is, which is basically just, it's a more, parable version of what this guy just said. But let's move on. This is really short. So from this point of view, Spiritism has yet another equally positive and perhaps more decisive result. It shows us, suicides themselves, who come to reveal their unhappy situation and to demonstrate the fact that no one violates with impunity God's law, which forbids human beings to cut their own life short. Among suicides, the suffering, although temporary instead of eternal, is nonetheless terrible and of such a nature as to induce to reflection those who might be tempted to leave here before God has so ordained. Spiritists thus have several reasons to counterbalance the idea of suicide. The certainty of a future life in which they know that their happiness will be in proportion to their unhappiness, and the level of resignation they had while on earth, the certainty that if they shorten their life, they will in fact attain a result exactly opposite to what they were hoping for. For they free themselves from one evil to incur one that is worse, longer, and more dreadful. That they are fooling themselves if they believe that by killing themselves they will go to heaven more quickly. That suicide is an obstacle to being reunited in the other world with the objects of their affections and whom they had hoped to meet there again. From whence follows the conclusion that suicide, bringing nothing but disappointment, is against their best interests. Therefore, the number of suicides prevented by Spiritism has been considerable, and one may conclude from this fact that when everyone is a Spiritist, there will be no more conscious suicides. Thus, comparing the results between materialist and Spiritist doctrines solely from the suicide point of view, we find that the logic of the former leads to suicide, whereas the logic of the latter deters it, which is a fact confirmed by experience. So this is Allan Kardec once again sort of talking about his research and what he noticed within the populations of spiritists versus the population of like scientists and Christian scientists, which is this idea that there is nothing in the afterlife. So there's nothing to look forward to. So if you're suffering now, you might as well just freaking kill yourself. That's like what he thinks scientists think, because he's a scientist and that's pretty much what they think. And then you have the Christians, which is the other extreme, which is, you will go to hell if you take your own life and heaven if you don't. Here, it's more about, again, there's no heaven and hell, but there is a rebirth cycle, and the actions are going to be equal to the reactions are going to be equal to your actions, the consequences. The pendulum will swing in the other direction if you go against your own divine destiny and against God's will for your path, right? Because again, God's will for you, right, according to this, is to evolve to spiritual. So if you go against that by cutting your life short and not living the lessons that he had planned for you, or that, actually better yet, that you had planned for yourself, then it becomes another cycle of suffering. So this is where Spiritist views are, but still, it is a very difficult, the way that he explains all of this is so difficult and so hard to read. We, especially all of us from like who were born in the 80s and young and who are younger, we just don't understand how people can live in a life where everyone is just gaslighting you. And like every generation before us, it's just everyone gaslighting everyone, and everyone is just cool with it. Like, it's just like, that's just, you speak your truth, and if you don't like it, you're a weak pussy and you just need to just go away. He talks like that. Allan Kardec talks like that. So we just have to be mindful and take it for its best pieces, right? So anywho, that is me for tonight. Anyone have any questions about what we just read? and or Spiritism or Spiritismo as a whole. Yeah, it's a very haughty idea. I'm telling you, Alex, the different schools of Spiritismo is so they some of the things that yeah, I really want to kind of just kind of pave my own way in that world, because I know what's worked for me and what hasn't. And yeah, the discussions about suffering and suicide and this sort of like elitism around like if you're morally and intellectually better than, and there is it's a lot of talk, especially in the spirits book, the very first book, a lot of talk about savages and these people who, are tribal and they don't know of moral and intellectual evolution, like it's like this whole we are better than you, as very European spiritism, very it's like it's a whole thing. So when we go back to more of our indigenous practices, um and we incorporate some of those indigenous practices to espiritismo, and specifically just sort of these folk traditions, when we sort of bring that into the fold, it brings us back to nature, it brings us back to community, it brings us back to relationships, it brings us back to compassion for those who are suffering, it brings us back to compassion for those who may be disabled or may have been born with certain issues, or may have a tendency to suicide, or may have a tendency to alcoholism or whatever. And it's this whole idea of just sort of bringing the body back into realignment again and re-empowering the body. That's really, spiritismo specifically, really allows us to find ourselves again, and through our connection with spirit. Um, so we are not doing like tarot readings or anything like that here today. No, we are not. Right. Exactly. Now, for those of you who are, popping in and don't know, what's going on, I'm reading from the, Allan Kardec's 5 codices, and I'm on the Gospel of Spiritism. Now, those of you who are interested in taking classes about spiritism, spiritismo, psychic mediumship, psychic development, the history, the metaphysical practices, the biology and the science behind our gifts and what it is that we do, all of that stuff. If you're interested in something like that, I teach those classes. I also have associates who teach classes that are wonderful, brilliant, brilliant people that I love referring other people to. So definitely link up with me. Go to my website, themagicalsolution.com, read up on the classes, email me to refer you to some of the other people, and I'll give you their names. I'll drop their names. And yeah, so get yourself in the zone. We're going to be starting a new year. 2023 is right around the corner, you guys. We have the rest of this month to cleanse our bodies out, to detox, to fast, to do all the things that we need to do to get rid of obstacles from our way, to confront the people that we've been needing to confront, to say the things that we've always wanted to say, get it all out, clean out the tables, bring out the skeletons from the closet, clean out the cobwebs, do the thing. Because when 2023 rolls around, you got to be ready for these blessings. They got to come. Okay. So these classes are great ways to understand how our spiritual bodies work and how we can utilize them in our life, how our spirits work, and our relationships with our spirits and how we can utilize that in our life. All of it. So drop me a line. It would be great to hear from you. And I will see you guys next Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, as we continue with this chapter 5. This Sunday, I believe it's the 10th or 11th, I am going to be interviewing J. Allen Cross, the author of American Brujeria and the author of A Witch's Field Guide to Paranormal Investigations. And it's going to be a great conversation. We're going to be talking basically about paranormal investigations, about ghost hunting, about our experiences dealing with spirits in different locations, the equipment that we use, the interactions that we have, the purpose of an investigator, the purpose of a psychic medium and a spiritist that go into those investigations. And we're going to get into all the fun stuff. So that's going to be Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube and Facebook. So make sure you guys stop in for that. Other than that, thank you so much. Happy Thursday. Thank you so much. And yes, they're uploaded onto my YouTube channel. They take 24 hours to upload once the live is done. All right, guys, have a beautiful Thursday night. Hopefully I'll see you guys on Sunday. Please like, comment, subscribe, share, do all the things. If you've ever gotten a service from me before, make sure you leave a review because those are always good to read. And I love you guys. Have a wonderful night.